Birthright podcast. Woo, yeah. All right. I like the energy. All right, there's music too. Yeah. All right. We all need to wake up a little. So, this is an exciting opportunity to engage in important conversations about maternal health, especially as it relates to Black mothers and birthing people. For those who may be new to Birthright, it is a groundbreaking podcast that celebrates Black birth stories and advocates for birth justice. Hosted by Kimberly Seals Ellers, the podcast offers a platform to share the joy, the resilience, and the challenges of Black birthing experiences. As we gather here to discuss maternal and infant health equity, the Birthright podcast mission aligns perfectly with our goals. It amplifies the voices and stories that are often overlooked, ensuring that Black mothers and birthing people are seen, are heard, and are supported. Podcasts like Birthright play a crucial role in shifting narratives and advocating for systemic change. By highlighting these personal stories, the podcast helps to humanize data and statistics, making the case for urgent action to improve maternal health outcomes for Black families. We are honored to have Kimberly Seals Ellers, an award-winning journalist, author, to be with us, journalist, author, and advocate as the host of Birthright. Kimberly has been a relentless voice in the fight for maternal health equity, and her work has inspired countless individuals and communities. We encourage you to actively participate by asking questions and connecting with the themes discussed. There will be time at the end of the podcast for your questions. Without further ado, let's welcome Kimberly Seals Ellers to the stage. Let's give her a warm round of applause as we start our podcast.
Thank you so much to the March of Dimes for this opportunity. Welcome to Birthright, a podcast about joy and healing in Black birth. I started Birthright because I was deeply concerned about the narrative in Black maternal health, the way the mainstream media covered Black maternal health, which was a lot of focus on doom and gloom, a lot of focus on sensationalized headlines of Black women dying. And I had a question, which was, what about the joy? What can we learn when birth goes right for Black women? Two things that I want you to remember. One, as I traveled the country speaking to folks, there were many Black women who had positive experiences, but they felt silenced because they know what the story has been told about us and what so many of their sisters had experienced. That's not good. And number two, we can learn from joy. I am very proud that after 2 seasons of Birthright, we brought in a team of qualitative researchers who analyzed the transcripts, which was 55 guests, and we created an instructional session for doctors and nurses. And I gave those researchers one charge. What could we learn from Black birthing joy? I'm really proud of what they created, and I would love to make sure that more medical schools and nursing schools and grand rounds are featuring how they can learn from Black birthing joy and not just from our death, demise, and despair, right? So let's get into it. Today, I'm proud to welcome a very special guest from right here in Chicago and to share the birthing story of a local Chicago mother. Leah Powell, will you join me? Leah was raised in the suburbs of Chicago and is enjoying life as a new mom. Although her day-to-day tasks include helping over 200 Chicagoland students plan for college, editing and refreshing resumes for job seekers, and chasing a 2-year-old, it is the life that she prayed for. And she could not tackle any of parts of motherhood without her partner, Greg, and together they are raising a well-traveled and please welcome Leah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. This is Leah, and this is her birthright story. Leah, take us back to when you first found out that you were pregnant.
Okay, so this was 2021. It was the month of March, I can remember. And sometime as women, we just had that feeling like, let me take a pregnancy test. So I was in my partner's bathroom. We weren't even living together at the time yet. I was in his bathroom, took the test, and I was shocked. I was 34 at the time, and I said, oh my gosh, like this is real. And I go out and I tell him, and he looks at it, he's okay. He just says okay, but he was very excited.
Good. So you were excited. He was
Yes,
excited.
very excited.
So you're moving along in your pregnancy. Things are going fairly well.
Yes, they were going great. Like I said, I was 34, which is 1 year before pregnancy is considered geriatric.
We don't like that word.
Okay, we frown upon that. Okay. And so, but I felt great. I know my mother had really bad morning sickness when she was pregnant. I didn't experience that. My skin was glowing, hair growing. It was great.
It was great. Okay, so you're in this great experience with your pregnancy, and then something happens around 20 weeks.
Yes. So at 20 weeks, that is when you get a detailed ultrasound because the baby should have all their organs by 20 weeks. So I'm excited. Yay, I get to see all of my baby's organs. So I get to the doctor, my doctor at the time. He's doing my ultrasound. I'm trying to make like light talk with him, but he was serious. Like he wasn't really talking. So eventually he says, okay, you see your cervix right here? Because I'm seeing everything that he's seeing. This should not be open. Your cervix is open. And I didn't know what to think. And so I go out. My boyfriend couldn't come into the area where I was. This was coming off of the shelter in place, you know, right after the pandemic. And when I went out to tell him what was going on, I was shaking like he's saying that my cervix is dilated early. My doctor at the time leads me to a hospital room. And so there's my OBGYN at the time and then the gentleman who performed the ultrasound. And so they're telling me, the OBGYN said, this is very serious. You know, your baby could come any day. The guy who did the ultrasound, the doctor who did the ultrasound, he told me that I needed to get a cerclage. Never had I heard of a cerclage. And I'm sure most people in this room know what it is. Right. But of course, it's when the cervix needs to be sewed up to save the pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And so the OBGYN at the time, she said she didn't want to do the cerclage because she was scared that she would rupture my bag, my amniotic sac. And she said, I've been calling around. I can't find anyone to do it. She just instilled a lot of fear in me. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I didn't know what to think.
So how are you feeling at that moment? Kind of like you've been having this excitement and this joy, and now you've hit an unexpected roadblock, challenge, or pivot.
It was very scary. I called my doula and explained to her what was going on, and she, you know, kept me calm and everything. They wanted to keep me at the hospital on that day to start doing like antibiotics and things. But my partner, he was like, I want us to leave. Mm-hmm. And we left. And then I jumped into research mode to get a second opinion.
Okay, good. How did that go?
It went well. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I had recently met with a midwife. My partner really wanted us to do a water birth. Okay. And so I had met with the midwife not long before this happened. I called that agency and told them what was going on just to see if they knew any resources. Mm-hmm. And so when I called the agency, they said, you know what? We want you to go see a doctor out in the Oak Park area. This all happened on a Friday. She said, I'm going to set up an appointment for you on Monday to get a second opinion.
So what happened when you go to this new doctor?
Okay, so I get to my new doctor on that Monday. When I see her, she's very calm. She's looking at me like, okay, what's going on? I tell her, and she said, okay, let me get your ultrasound. She sees it, and then she said, okay, go downstairs, go get prepped for surgery. We're gonna do a cerclage.
Just like that.
Like it was nothing.
How did that make you feel?
I was like, what? I could not believe it because the doctor, the OBGYN before her, made it seem impossible to find this in Chicago. So when she said it like it was nothing, I was excited and praising God.
So you went from this moment of having this extreme fear with one provider to feeling more confident and empowered with another one. Nothing about your physical state had changed, but certainly the way that they were responding to it was everything.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So before we talk more about this provider, I want to kind of move us through what happened next, because we still weren't in the clear.
Right.
So at 26 weeks.
Yes. Okay. So I get my cerclage.
Mm-hmm.
It went very well. I remember right after she did it, and I'm in the waiting area, post-surgery area, kind of calming down from the medication. And she came in and to listen to my baby's heartbeat. And she's like, there's your little man. And it was just so comforting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she told me that I had to chill out. I had to rest my body. I could not be moving around, as usual. Luckily, I was working remotely at the time. So I said, okay, I'll go home and just work in the bed, and stay relaxed. At around week 26 and 6 days, I did have a premature rupture. My water broke. When my water broke, my new OBGYN, she let me know. She was calm. Again, she's always calm, which I love. And she let me know to pack my bags because I would be headed to Hinsdale Hospital to wait until the baby came.
Wow. How long was that?
I was at Hinsdale Hospital for about 3.5 weeks just waiting.
Now, I have never had a podcast. Remember, Birthright is a podcast about joy and positive Black birthing experiences. And I have never had a podcast guest who has spent 3.5 weeks in bed rest in a hospital reach out to be on this platform.
Yeah.
What was it about 3 weeks on bed rest? How did your provider actually make that not the experience that it feels like it would be for all of us?
Right. Well, luckily, I was still working remote, like I said, so had my computer, and I was happy that my company allowed me to continue working because it takes your mind off of the day-to-day. Continued to work. My partner brought the Fire Stick so we can watch our shows. We had good food. It wasn't so bad. And then I didn't have a maternity shoot. I had my brother come to the hospital.
Uh-oh.
We went to the garden area and I took some maternity photos.
And all the time, how was your provider checking in on you?
She was excellent. The very first night, they had to pump me up with antibiotics and magnesium and all these different things to make sure my baby was okay. They put in a catheter, I believe it's pronounced, and told me I couldn't eat. So that first night was hard. And I think I either texted or called my doctor, like, save me. So she came a few hours after I was admitted, and she said, yeah, take this out of her. Let her eat. I'm like, thank you. And so she would visit me. Like sometime I would wake up, oh, hi, doctor. She would visit me. She would FaceTime me. She was absolutely amazing.
Oh my goodness, this sounds like an amazing provider, the kind that we all wish we had. I know I did. I would love to meet her. Let's see. Dr. Monique Broadman, will you join us? Dr. Monique Brotman is a Cook County trained obstetrician gynecologist in practice for 24 years. She specializes in high-risk obstetrics as well as being an accomplished robotic surgeon. In her private practice, she furthers the education of the next generation by being a clinical instructor to medical students. She is an advocate for physiological birth by supporting the birthing parent and working closely with midwives and physicians. Welcome, Dr. Brotman, to the Birthright
Thank you for
podcast.
having me.
And most importantly for our story, you are Leah's trusted provider.
Thank you.
You
It
have
was a
to
pleasure. It was a pleasure and a privilege.
Tell us, how did you get this way?
Jump right in. I believe that when you and I were talking earlier, we talked about some pivotal points in my training. And before I went to medical school, I was a nurse. I was actually a labor and delivery nurse. I was held actually many positions in a hospital before that, and learned a lot of aspects of healthcare through my experiences. Once I went to medical school, gained a residency, I went to Cook County Hospital and saw many experiences of people who didn't have access to care, came to us by luck or by direction and dint of will, and deserved to be cared for. So I think that those things are what guided me into how I care for Leah, how I care for my patients. It's very important to me.
Thank you for sharing. So Leah shared her version of her birth story. Do you remember meeting Leah? What was your impression when you first met her?
I remember getting a phone call on Friday afternoon from a midwife that I work closely with in the community. She gave me a story and I said, sure, I'll see her on Monday. She seemed stable for the weekend, otherwise I would have seen her right away. And she was given initial instructions to lay low, stay in bed rest, pelvic rest, those kinds of things. And so when I saw her on Monday, of course I didn't have the ultrasound that I needed, so I got that really quickly. And we made a plan, I think, for a few hours later to have a cerclage. Part of training at Cook County gives you a huge breadth of experiences, and cerclages happen to be one of them. They tend to be high risk, so many providers will shy away from them. Every procedure has a risk and a benefit, and so that's discussed with our patients and with Leah, and those decisions are made in partnership.
Is that your experience, Leah?
Yes, for sure. Like I said, I had never even heard the term before, and it sounds painful to have your cervix sewn up. So when the ultrasound tech told me that, I was like, I'm not quite interested. But but he was adamant. He said, look, find a doctor who does this all the time.
Very good.
And I found her.
And so I asked you this on our call, Leah, because I want you to explain, again, this is a conversation about positive Black birthing experiences. What specifically made your experience joyful?
What made my experience joyful was basically a story of tragedy to triumph. Like going from it seeming impossible for my pregnancy to progress to meeting someone who, oh yeah, come on, I can help you out. I can save your baby. My baby is here. He is 2. He's awesome. He's working me. And so that's the joy. My baby made it.
I love that. So tell us about the actual birth.
Yeah, so I was 29 weeks and 6 days. I did experience some bleeding on this particular day. And then when the doctors were monitoring my baby's heartbeat, they noticed it was dipping, but not coming up fast enough for their liking. Instead of telling the nurse, who did I call? FaceTime Dr. Brotman. This is what's going on. And she's like, okay, can you show me what it, she wanted to see everything, the pad, like the blood, And so I showed her, and she came to the hospital at like midnight. And even one of the nurses was like, they told me, you were supposed to tell me first. I'm like, I'm sorry. I feel comfortable with Dr. Rodman. So yeah, so she came at midnight, and we did a C-section. And I was just so confident in her abilities. I didn't mind a C-section. She's superwoman to me. And it wasn't bad, like as some people talk about it to be. But yes, so my baby was born 3 pounds and 7 ounces, I want to say, which is a pretty good weight for 29 weeks. They immediately put him in the NICU, and she, stitched me right up, and I healed perfectly.
Okay. And I think there was a reason why, a part of the reason why Dr. Broadman wanted you to go to this particular hospital was because of its reputation for its NICU, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
You noted 2 things about that hospital.
They could care for you on labor and delivery long term.
Okay.
And they had a NICU that could accommodate
A very small
premature baby.
And it was a great experience too at that hospital. I was impressed.
Yeah, that's wonderful. When we think about joy, right, and I say this a lot with the podcast, it's not because of, it's often in spite of, right? No, birthing stories don't have to be perfect, and people are finding joy out of small things, right? And that's really what it's about. Not that everybody's going to be joyful is not perfect. We are all kind of in a broken system. But what does it take for Black women to have a joyful experience, right? And often it doesn't take a lot to be seen, to be heard, to be respected, to be cared for. Not rocket science, not rocket science. The other thing that's really important, and we're going to get to our real talk segment of this episode, is what we're seeing here is a demonstration of a white female provider providing exceptional care to a Black woman. And we need to talk about that, right? Because there are lots of ways to provide for us to receive the care that we deserve, right? Sometimes that can be with a Black provider. I know many people feel like that's an important starting point. And statistically, we all can't go, data-wise, we all can't go to Black doctors. The numbers just are going to tell us it's not possible. There's not enough in the pipeline, there's not enough right there. And so what we actually need is for all providers to be able to care for us in a way that we say is what respectful care is, not your definition of respectful care, right? So important. And so, Leah, when you first went to your provider, how did you select your provider?
The first one.
The first one.
So yes, I had this notion that I should find someone who looks like me. And I think I was given a list of providers from an initial place where I got my very first ultrasound. And so I said, well, let me try a Black female. She wasn't that much older than me. And clearly, that wasn't the best
Fit for you.
fit for me.
Right. And so again, it's a starting point, but people have to do their due diligence, because a lot of times Leah could have stayed with the wrong provider, perhaps for what she felt was the right reasons, and we don't know what the outcome would be. And so I want to honor you for trusting your instincts, and saying this isn't a place for me, and that you found where you could feel safe. Yeah. That's really important that we lift that up. The other thing that I think is important that we acknowledge and say out loud more often is that there is a culture in medicine. And oftentimes, and many times, unfortunately, even Black providers have succumbed to that, right? I say to people all the time, I live in New York City, and if a Black NYPD officer pulls me over, do I feel more safe? No. I don't, because I know that there's a culture and a training and a brotherhood that person may subscribe to, which overrides any racial identity. And so many times, unfortunately, and we see this in our Earth App reviews, that alone is not enough to protect us. And it's an uncomfortable truth, but we need to sit with that. We need to always do our due diligence, regardless of what folks may appear to be. It is really important because we are being failed by providers across the spectrum, and what we need is quality care, right? Dr. Brotman, what do you think, speaking to other providers, what would you want to tell them about caring for Black women in particular?
There is a vulnerability to being pregnant across race, across cultures. Before I was pregnant, I knew it, but didn't understand it. Once I had my own pregnancies, then I understood that vulnerability. And as a care provider for birth people, I think it's important to understand that vulnerability. And you really need to delve into different cultures because there are different vulnerabilities that affect each culture. So if you're speaking about the Black culture specifically, spending some time understanding where that person came from. And that is true of all cultures that walk into my door. So empowering them, giving them that feeling that this is a partnership and this isn't me being paternalistic and telling you what we're going to do. There are options and there's benefits to each option, and spending some time delving into that person's makeup is important as an individual. And that will translate very easily into caring for the Black population or other minority populations.
How is that possible within the current system? I think so many providers say we don't have time for that. You know, we're rushed, we're overloaded, we're stressed out. Nurses saying the same thing. Like, is it possible within our system, or is it just not possible?
It comes with experience. It may not have been possible when I was a baby doctor, but as I grew up a little bit, then you learn how to guide conversations to what's important. And that may not be the physicality that's standing in front of you right then and there. It could be some piece of history that's actually going to change your diagnosis.
So important. Leah, how important was that provider connection and that feeling for you?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to feel safe and I wanted to feel like I was in good hands. I will say that the first OBGYN had never had any children. And so that's interesting what you said. It's because you yourself had experienced pregnancy, you understood the vulnerability. And maybe that's why she didn't know how to talk to me, because she didn't quite understand how I was feeling as a pregnant woman waiting on my child to be born.
So many, nuances to the experience, right?
Yes.
But that word safety is just top of mind because it means different things for different people. And we need to learn what that means for each birthing person that we kind of encounter, right? Really important that we do that. I want to come back to you, Leah, to talk a little bit about your partner.
Okay. Yes. And
because our Black men, our men, are critical components in these stories.
yes.
How was he coping through all of this?
Oh my gosh. It was hard for him because he, was really hoping that I carried as long as I should have. But he loved Dr. Brotman, even when my baby was like a few months old and maybe sick. And he said, well, call Dr. Brotman. I said, she's an OBGYN. We need a pediatrician. But he loves her. Also, I had a doula. Shout out to birthingabundantly.com. And my partner and I would meet with her and she would give him tips. Here are some massages you can do for Leah. Here's how Leah may be feeling and how you can, assist her. But he did great. He slept in the hospital every night.
Good.
Which was helpful.
Did they set him up when you were in bed rest?
Yes, so he had a little couch, and we got him like a pad, so it wasn't so hard
Right.
to sleep on. And then my doula told me, when the baby comes, you all have to pick which shift you're gonna do. Who's gonna take the morning shift? Who's gonna take the night shift? So he took mornings because I'm not a morning person, and I took nights.
Okay.
So he that was so helpful. Like, I couldn't imagine being by myself with a newborn.
Yeah. It's pretty hard. And one of the things that I really appreciate, I think there's a lot of focus on doulas at the birth. And I really want to remind us that we focus about the value of doulas is in their education throughout the pregnancy experience and postpartum. There's a lot of, for me, scary emphasis on having a doula at the birth, but many times that is too late to change some outcomes, right? Particularly if you have a provider that you haven't properly vetted or don't know. And this education that doulas provide also includes the partners and grandma and anybody else who's going to be involved. They will make sure they are all up to speed and educated and informed. And that's a valuable education in a culture that has literally stripped away our education of our bodies and our birthing experiences, right? This is valuable kind of relearning that we need to kind of take in. And so I'm so glad that you saw. How did you hear about doulas?
So I went to an all-female college, so I have seen a lot of pregnancies. And so I remember back in 2012, one of my Spelman sisters from Harlem, from Harlem, New York, she was telling me all about what a doula is and how she was searching for a doula. Fast forward almost a decade later, and I become pregnant. My doula had just entered the field. And once she found out I was pregnant, she said, "You can be my first client for free." And she was great. She's in Detroit, but we met on Zoom pretty much every week. And then once my baby was born, she came to Chicago to show me basic things I need to know. Yeah, she was awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the storytelling about doulas because, we want everyone to know about doulas and their value, and make sure that we as a community are sharing that information out, because that is how information travels, through our storytelling, through our girlfriends, through our networks, through our church groups, right? That's how we spread information. Really, really important. And shout out to being someone's first client, because that wasn't always something everybody wants to do.
Oh, really? You know what? This young lady, her name is Desiree Ayeni. I met her in New York years ago. And her personality, she had like this healing type of aura about her from the first day I met her. So when she told me she was becoming a doula, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So I was excited about working with her.
I love it. So you had a doula that you knew,
Yes.
and that you trusted. You found a provider that you trusted and you felt safe around. You had a supportive partner, right? And so
That's right.
all of that seems to have overridden the cerclage at 20 weeks, bed rest in a hospital, and a C-section. Is that what you're here to tell us?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Well, I love it. We know that our experiences, don't have to be defined by the challenges or by the things that happen. And that it is about the way that we're made to feel. It is about feeling safe. It is about having support. And we can learn we learn so much right here about what Black women need to have a powerful and joyful birth experience. And it's not about a perfect journey. No, you certainly had enough pivots and turns along the way. But with those things, you were able to get through and end up on the other side, right? With a positive experience and your little man running ragged on you right now.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Brotman, what is your call to action? As you listen to Leah's story, I just want to, give you an opportunity to reflect on the things that Leah has shared. And also, what is your call to action to other doctors?
Listen, They just need to listen to decide what's important in the information that's given or the information that we can elicit is what's going to help us help others best. And that's really what we all want to do, is make that path easier for people. Just paying attention and listening to what is being said to them instead of creating things and algorithms in our head. Just pay attention.
Yeah, so powerful. Leah, is there anything you want to say to Dr. Broadman?
Dr. Broadman, dear Dr. Broadman, just thank you so much for staying calm with everything that came up with me, making me feel taken care of, listening to me, just like you noted, and just safely bringing my baby into the world.
It's a pleasure and a privilege.
Thank you.
I close every episode of Birthright by asking the question, what is our birthright? Because it's really important that we define for ourselves and understand what is it that we deserve simply because we exist, right? So I'm going to break my tradition, and I'm going to ask Dr. Broadman. I don't usually ask the provider in my episodes, what is our birthright? It's a question I reserve. But I wanted to offer that today to you, Dr. Broadman. What is Black women's birthright in our birthing times?
A physiologic birth.
Ooh.
I think that everybody deserves, and that has a different definition. That can be an operative delivery, but it's what they're empowered to feel, and that is their physiologic experience.
I appreciate that. That's a new learning for me.
That was deep.
And Leah, will let you have the last word.
Oh, yes.
What is our birthright?
Our birthright is to be treated fairly and with decency.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Simple as that. Thank you both for joining me for this
Thank
powerful
you.
discussion.
Thank you for having us.
I hope that everyone subscribes to Birthright, download, like, follow the YouTube page, because our stories have power, right? And we have to support telling a different story in the ways that we're talking about our experiences in pregnancy and childbirth. We're going to close this episode and open up to some questions and comments. Yes, over there. Is there a mic?
Oh,
Oh, yes.
Oh, she has it.
Thank you. And there's a question on this side. There we go. Okay, I'm going here first.
I have a question for Dr. Broadman. I just want to know, first of all, what your experience was going through and learning about the nursing model of care, and then the physician model of care, and then whether your nursing background helped, and like how your nursing background helped inform your care as a OBGYN.
A lot of what we learn in medical school is very diagnosis and patient oriented. And nursing tends to take the entire picture. And so bringing that into my medical training and looking at the entire picture is what allowed me to step back and learn about the proper way to take care of people with dignity and respect.
So important.
Greetings, Dr. Broadman. Thank you so much for supporting her. One question I have for you is, as CPMs are getting ready to hit the ground here in Illinois, we are actively looking for other providers that we could collaborate with. So my question to you is, would you be open to doing intercollaboration with certified professional midwives in terms of supporting our clients in home births as possibly being a backup? We were sitting here at the table saying we got to talk to you after, but I thought I'd just ask.
So actually, absolutely. One of the groups that I do support are home birth midwives, which is how we established our relationship, and again, feel very strongly in the choice that people make to have their babies. And I will support that. I'm not delivering at home, but I'm the person that will be transferred to and give the situation as much empowerment and the birth parent as much empowerment as possible to deliver safely. That's my role.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really important that we identify those types of providers who can be supportive.
Over here.
Oh,
Hi.
hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kashika, representing Jersey.
Hey.
I had a question for the doctor. You said, when the question was asked, you said a Black woman's birthright is physiology. And I'm just asking for you to go a little bit deeper into what you mean behind that. For me, I like to explain stuff in a more of a layman terms. So I'm just wondering, on a deeper level, what did you mean when you said birthright and physiology?
No, a physiological
Physiological,
birth.
sorry,
A
there goes.
physiologic birth.
Okay, and because it's hard for me to visualize what you're talking about as far as in me being a Black mom and that's my birthright. I still don't know what you mean. So I'm wondering if you go a little bit deeper when you say that.
The traditional definition of having a physiologic birth is having one without interventions or medical interventions. There's always going to be interventions that are performed that can be acceptable. A physiologic birth to me is something that the birth parent gets to choose with some direction and some encouragement, but choose to be able to deliver the way they want to deliver. Right. And so for me, a physiologic birth isn't necessarily one without medical intervention, because sometimes that's necessary, but it's more of the birth that you were hoping to have. And it may not be the one that you expected to have, but it's the one that you are, it's the one that you can use in ultimate satisfaction, the one that you gain personal satisfaction from. Ultimately, that experience is very pivotal in our lives. And we want it to be as positive as possible. And so that's my method of allowing this to happen. I guide and I confer, but never decide in isolation.
That's great.
Hi, Dr. Robbins. Thank you so much. I'm Denise Bowles from New York. And I have a twofold question for you, because as a high-risk doula, we doulas latch on to physicians like you. You're the white unicorn. You are the exception to the rule. You're woke. You get it. You're practicing what you're preaching. So how do you convey your practice style to your peers in hopes to promote change? And how do you do your self-care? Because you are attracting a lot of work and a lot of rhetoric to yourself. So how do you take care of yourself so you don't burn out?
It's a very good question. The answer to the first question is by example. I'm going to do what I do, and if you care to notice it and pay attention to it, I'm happy to assist you in doing things the way I do them. They're not 100%. They work for me. But by doing what I do, I set the example in my community and the community at large, and that's what I want to do. I have the benefit of teaching medical students, and they get to see how I do things, right? And so I think that that's important. Thank you. I have the benefit of interacting with a lot of midwives, and they get to see how I do things, and I get to see how they do things. So I have learned a lot from them. Right? Your second part of the question was?
How do you take care of yourself?
Oh, the thing I forgot. So the first answer that I'm going to have to you is I truly enjoy what I do. So that is part of my self-care. The second answer that I'm going to say is I do take time for myself. Walking the golf course with my 17-year-old is something that I was doing this morning. I might have been answering my phone occasionally, but I take time for those things that I think that are very important. Just like taking care of my patients, I have to take care of myself or I won't be able to take care of my patients. So taking time to do that is ultimate to me. And setting that example for my family, for my kids, that's how I'm going to do that. I tend to bring a lot of good community support, so I don't get a lot of pushback from my peers. When you bring business to a place, all the noise starts to settle down. Right?
Very true. Very true.
So that's my answer. They may not agree with handing my cell phone over to my patient, but that to me was the easiest way for people to get a hold of me. I may not be physically able to go see her every day or every moment when she needs me, but if she can access me by FaceTime, that's really easy for me. I didn't even have an iPhone. I used to use my son's iPhone. Like, can I use your iPhone? Right? And so that was very easy for me, just to give, and people often wonder, how do I get time when so many people have my direct contact? They don't abuse it. When you have access to me, they don't abuse it.
Wow. That's a learning right
Good
there.
questions.
For you, Dr. Robin. Your point about vulnerability after you had your own babies, I completely agree. And especially when there's extenuating circumstances like a stillbirth prior. I'm sure men can somehow develop that, but do you feel by and large it's easier for female physicians who have had children?
That's a very interesting question. I find a lot of people seek out female physicians and maybe female Black physicians if you're of that minority. But I don't think it's true, because I see women who have been trained in a traditional medical environment somehow missed the empathy of being able to do that thing. And I think through experience, we gain that. Right, so very young people may not do that, but as we gain experience, people will be able to learn that. And drawing in the family is very important. Drawing in Leah's husband for her support. He felt supported. The doula was amazing, right, in allowing him to partner up. So I think those were very important pieces. I don't want to limit one gender or another, because I've seen both, right? I've seen very compassionate on both sides, and I choose not to look at it that way.
I'm going to take podcast host privilege and ask the what will it take question, right? What will it take to create more physicians who think like you and interact like you and, have this relationship to doulas and midwives? Like, what will it take for us to get there?
I think education.
In medical
I trained
schools?
in medical school, in residency. I had nurse midwives who worked with me on the floors. I learned from them. I learned birthing from them. And whereas we may have had a very specific way of birthing at Cook County, we didn't have a tub. We didn't have a lot of things that we like to think of for pain relief. But I think education is the key to all of it, and allowing interrelationships between different healthcare professions. That should happen all the time.
Yeah.
I think that should happen all the time.
It's amazing. I mean, that is not happening all the time. And what we need to do to break down the barriers between midwives and doctors in that way, so that we could have the kind of care that we all deserve.
Podcasts like this do that.
Well, we're making a small dent. All right, I think we have time for one last question. Hi.
Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Okay, this was wonderful. So I want to hear from the two of y'all. What would you like to see? I'm so glad that you had a doula. What would you all like to see in other doulas to recreate these types of outcomes? What type of feedback would you give as a mom who's worked with a doula to a doula? And what type of feedback would you give to doulas who want to support folks who are birthing in the hospital?
That's a really good question. So one thing with my doula, I just felt like I could always call on her, and it almost felt like she was waiting for me to hear from me and see how things were going. So I appreciated that. I appreciated her learning with me. She didn't quite know about the cerclage at that time. She did her research and was able to tell me more about it. And there are so many different type of births, as we all know. I was lucky that my doula also experienced birthing a child at 29 weeks. So that kind of worked in my favor to where she was able to tell me what to do in the NICU. And it was little things like, Leah, feel free to clean off the cords that are attached to the baby. Leah, the nurses and the doctors, they're going to tell you a lot of things, but this is your baby. And you do what feels right. So just being that advocate, you're kind of bombarded when you first give birth by different people who are coming in the room. And it felt nice to say, oh, I spoke to my doula. My doula has it, so.
Love it.
I think that doulas need to approach providers more often. I think that there tends to be this idea that that's the doctor or that's the midwife and they're doing their job. And I think that the jobs are interrelated. I think the jobs are always interrelated, right? And to best support your birthing parent, you need to be able to gain as much information as possible. And working together is how you're going to gain that information.
Well, I think we have a lot of notes that we can take back with us, including who's working on cloning Dr. Brockman, so we can get her in some of these more medical schools and work with some of these up and coming physicians. Thank you both for sharing your story and your experience and with us today. We are honored. I am grateful. Yes, and I thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for having us.